Anyway, so just for the record, Skip Walker, we're doing inspecting garage doors first up. I'm going to try to move through this fairly quickly because I think most everybody in this room probably is relatively familiar with all this stuff, and we all have our different takes on it. Hopefully one of the goals today is to get everybody a little bit more on the same sheet of music. And then, again, this is also for the benefit of the folks that aren't here. Because of the recording, I really do want to try to help CREIA build a body of educational material so we support our candidates and new members to the best of our ability. If anybody needs handouts, and there's a bunch of them over there, feel free. I am going to, when this is over, I'm going to email Terry or whoever wants it, PDFs of all this stuff so that it can be distributed to anybody that's here. There's no magic about this. It's not like copyrighted stuff and whatnot. The goal is to try to, help educate people. So anyway, so we're going to get going. Inspecting garage doors. These are my opinions, not intended to expand the scope of the CREIA standards or ASHI standards. I always tell people, you feel free to ignore me. My wife does it all the time. So I'm used to not being paid attention to. So anyway, really important though, we're going to talk about stuff here that's in these inspection standards published by DASMA and in the deck segment by NADRA and whatnot that are way beyond the scope of a home inspection. So the fact that we're talking about them doesn't imply that you should be doing them. You can choose to do anything you want. That's a business decision. The CREIA standards and ASHI standards represent the minimum standard for inspections. I think at some level or another, every one of us exceeds those standards, and that's called a business decision. So anyway, just to get that out on the table. Kind of the learning objectives I have here today, we're going to take a look at ASHI and CREIA standards as they relate to garage doors, try to understand some of the safety issues involved, understand the rules governing garage door openers, and I'm talking about governmental and code related stuff. Take a look and understand what the components of a typical door and door opener system are, and then take a look at what industry accepted standards for inspections of garage doors. And when I talk about industry, I'm not talking about ours, I'm talking about the garage door industry. So that's kind of what we're going to cover in the next 45 minutes or so. ASHI standards of practice in 10.1 say the inspector shall inspect garage vehicle door and garage vehicle door operators. The exclusions are not required to test any automatic safety devices or controls. So that's ASHI's version. CREIA says we have to inspect vehicle doors and openers, not required to operate, test, or determine the type of smoke or carbon monoxide alarm or test vehicle door safety devices. Actually, this wording right here is mine because I didn't want us to be on the hook for determining whether alarms were ion or photo, or whether they were hardwired or battery backup, or whether they had 10-year fixed batteries in them, which is another thing that at one point the current law included, actually to kind of digress a little bit, the current smoke alarm law at one point, the draft of it, said home inspectors were going to have to take the alarms down and figure out whether they had 10-year batteries and determine whether they were installed to current codes. Fortunately, we were able we prevailed in our opposition to that. That was under George Harper's reign as chair. Vehicle doors, largest, heaviest moving object in a house. 400 or 500 pounds minimum. The big wood ones, they can easily go 1,000 pounds. It's a big deal. Estimated about 30,000 injuries per year. The number has not changed that much, really, even after we put all the safety devices in. So that's a concern. About 2 to 4 deaths per year in children between 2 and 15. Guess why? They like to play with them. They go up and down and they're cool and they make noise and whatnot. CPSC estimates 40% of door safety devices don't work properly. So 4 out of 10 of the doors that you look at conservatively, the safety devices are probably not going to function properly. In my experience, that's a very optimistic number. I think it's much higher than that, especially when it comes to safety beams and the height of safety beams and other things that go into the safety of the door, like the height of the switches, so kids can't reach them to play with them, things like that. So they're a big deal, and the consequences. Going back to talking about Neil Muckler doing appliances, he was talking at that CREIA conference, and he actually touched on garage door openers when he was doing appliances, because at some level or another they kind of are, and they don't fit real well on other parts. And he mentioned at that point that a little girl had just been killed in San Diego, where the father had installed the door. Imagine going to sleep at night knowing that this happened to your daughter. I forget, she was like 2 or 3 years old. Parents pulled into the garage, which is odd because they could actually park their car in the garage. I don't know about you, but I can't. So anyway, they pulled their car into the garage. They removed groceries, were taking them into the house. The little girl they thought was in the house. She was actually on the far side of the car where they couldn't see underneath the door. And on their way in, they hit the button and closed the door. And what happened was the dad had installed the safety beams like up knee high. The little girl was laying down, so the beams didn't catch her. And the auto reverse was adjusted improperly, came down, hit her in the diaphragm. Because it knocked the wind out of her, she couldn't scream for help, and she suffocated. After that, I never looked at a garage door the same ever again. About 2 or 3 years ago, Maryland, little girl killed. So these things deserve some respect, and in my opinion, they deserve some attention, because I look at what we do as we're the ones safeguarding the public safety in those houses. I don't think anybody else takes this stuff as seriously as we do. 1992, which is the date at which we started to see safety devices on garage doors, the year, 85 deaths over the previous decade or so attributed to garage doors. That's the old ones that didn't have any safety devices on them at all, and if you hit the button, they just closed, no matter what. That prompted CPSC to actually take some action. Beginning in '93, all automatic garage door openers had to comply with UL 325. That's the magic number for garage door standards, 325. It's actually a federal law. So it is illegal to sell a garage door opener in the United States that does not comply with UL 325, and it's codified what the standards actually. It has to have 2 safety devices, they have to be independent. All that stuff is in 16 CFR 211 that they have to meet 325. California Health and Safety Code repeats that. It says they also have to be meeting 325. So basically, you shouldn't see any garage door openers that don't meet that standard on the shelf. It's actually a violation of federal and state law to sell them. There's a bunch of stuff in that health and safety code that I cannot imagine actually happens in the real world. For example, requires service technicians to safety test the devices and place a warning tag on them if they're not functional, assuming they're not repairing them at that point. It makes it illegal to install a new door, and leave it connected to an old door opener, or a door opener that does not have functional safety devices on it. How many times you go out and see a new door with a 1980 garage door opener attached to it? Violation of California state law since 1993. And the other critical thing is that it doesn't have to be an old door opener. It just has to be a door opener that the safety devices are not fully functional on. The technician's actually subject to a $500 fine if they don't either fix it or tag it And if they install a new door, they are not allowed to reconnect that old door opener to it. So just a little food for thought as you go out and look at garage doors. So here's the actual code. It says any person hired to service or repair any residential automatic garage door opener shall, upon completion of the service or repair, if any, determine whether it reverses on contact with a rigid 2-inch high obstacle placed on the surface beneath the garage door. And then if it doesn't pass the test, that person shall complete and conspicuously attach to the door a red certificate as follows. Has to have all that information on it, which basically gives the address and the manufacturer of the door and the date of manufacture, the serial number, model number. The tech has to sign and date it and put his company name and stuff on it. And again, the chances of that happening, I don't know any techs that even know they're supposed to be doing some of this stuff. In addition to any other remedies permitted by law, any violations of this subdivision subject to a civil penalty of $500 per opener installed and operational that is not in compliance with this section. A seller who violates the notice, seller meaning the dealer, not the seller of the house, is subject to a $500 fine as well. So the dealer could be fined as well as the technician. So UL 325, what is it? It requires a primary safety device, which is either a contact sensor or a door position locator, or the way they look at it. And then the secondary safety device, which has to be independent of the primary, is usually the infrared beams. There's some doors that use a different mechanism, but this is what you're going to see most of the time. The other thing the door has to include that you're not really ever going to, you don't see it, it's not visible, is there has to be a 30-second clock or door position monitor. So if the door starts its downward movement and within 30 seconds it has not reached the bottom position on the track, the door has to automatically open to the full position because it's assuming that something happened in between, it's blocked, and they want the door to come back to the full open position so that someone's not entrapped. So that's basically what UL 325 says. They leave it to the manufacturers to determine what these safety devices actually are and how they work, but they tell people kind of what they have to do. So for example, that contact or obstruction sensor, which is when it hits something it's supposed to reverse, it has to reverse when it hits something. The secondary system has to, when there's an obstruction in front of the door, it has to not allow the door to move. How you do that, Mr. Manufacturer, your business, but this is what it has to do. Important thing to understand, garage door opener safety devices are not designed to prevent injury. They're designed to prevent entrapment. So, as crappy as it may sound, if a little kid got their ribs cracked when a garage door came down, but the door opened, then the door opener safety devices did their job, which is not good for the little kid with the cracked ribs by any stretch, but that's the reality of it. They're anti-entrapment devices, not designed to prevent injury. So someone can still, on a door that meets all UL 325 standards, someone can get seriously injured, even with that door, those safety devices in place. The primary system has to have an inherent reversing mechanism. So it has to automatically, if it detects a problem, go to the full open position. It's actually one of the things that some of the old doors may have had these obstruction detection systems, but in the older ones, they might just simply stop. On the newer doors, the ones that actually fully comply with the 93 version of UL 325, it hits an obstruction, and I think it can wait 2 seconds or something, and then the door has to come back up to the full open position. The idea is, if it simply detected, if it hit you like the little girl that died in San Diego, it hit her and knew there was an obstruction, and it didn't keep pushing, the little girl still dies because she's already trapped. So they want the door to open up so that the person is not trapped anymore. And again, it has to return to the full open position, and yeah, it is 2 seconds within hitting an obstruction. This is kind of the way they work. I mean, I was trying to, the way I test the doors is not the way you're supposed to with a 2x4. I take the doors as they're coming down and I rock them a little bit like that. And the reason I do that is because most of these doors, the motor, the shaft, has a pulse counter on it. So what the pulse counter does is it's almost like a strobe. It's counting these little ticks on the wheel as it turns and interrupts the beam. And as long as they're consistent, you know, if they're, let's say it's a tenth of a second per pulse, if it's consistent, they assume the door is moving smoothly. If all of a sudden the pulses go from a tenth of a second to a half a second, then they know the door's stalling somehow, and that's how they actually detect, in most cases, that's how they actually detect how it moves. So if you understand how the door is actually detecting the movement, I think it makes it easier to understand how you might want to test them, because you know how to actually make that occur. And actually rocking them a little bit will do that, because it then thinks the door is stalled. I do have Ken Collins, who I know Terry knows, and I know David knows, down in Silicon Valley. He's been testing with a 2x4 for the last 10, 12 years, and that is the way UL 325 says you must test the door. So it's sort of like smoke alarms. The UL standard for smoke alarms says you have to use the button. The UL standard for garage door openers says you have to use a 2x4 laying on its flat side to test it. He's been testing them for 10, 12 years, has not had a single door break. So that's always been the concern I had was, you know, you put the 2x4 down, you break the door, do you own the door? And I don't know, how many people have bought a door?
How many people have ruined a door?
Well, that's what I mean. How many?
Well, that's
Yeah, I bought one. I admit it. And I still test them because I find so many that don't work right that I'd rather buy one every 10 years than have somebody get hurt. Yeah, Carl.
I believe I have to agree with you. I use my hands because I bought 3 doors 20 years ago, and I quit. I said no. I said I'm not going to break them because they're not installed correctly.
Yep. So the comment was that Carl actually bought 3 doors and started testing with his hands because he hasn't had to buy any doors since then. I guess does that sort of summarize it a little bit? Yeah, but you still test them. I think it's important, but it's absolutely a business decision, and you're not required to do it under the standards that actually specifically says you're not required to do it. And the reason is because you have to decide whether you want the liability for saying it's right or saying it's not right. Anyway, secondary system, door proximity sensor. That's something to test for something in the travel path. Has to detect a person or object in the door path. The most common system is infrared beams. There's also some ones that have pressure sensors on the edge of the door, much like an elevator, like a pad, and it'll detect it that way. That's a lot more exotic. I've actually never seen, I think I've seen one of those, because the doors they usually are attached to it's really high-end stuff. So secondary system, again, the little beams, anything in the path, the door's not allowed to move. Now the door, if the system with these, if the door gets obstructed mid-travel, it will stop. It won't necessarily return to full open, but it's not required under 325. The standard also allows for a constant contact switch where you can manually depress to close the door. So if you hold the button down, you can force the door to close regardless, which is useful if the beams are out of alignment or whatnot, and it's the only way to get the door to close. all other means have to be 100% independent of the primary system. There's a typo there, actually. So they have to be independent of the secondary system. So the two safety devices can't talk to each other. They have to act independently. So, you could run into a situation where the beams become obstructed, but maybe they fail. They don't want that to affect whether it hits something and reverses and vice versa. Required also for all door closing systems a 30-second clock. So like I said, if the door doesn't hit the full closed position and it has the little switches at the top that detect those, within 30 seconds, it has to automatically go to full open. In lieu of that, they can use a real-time door position monitor. Again, more exotic, but it'll actually track where the door's at and know, as opposed to just within 30 seconds, if that switch doesn't get hit, then I've got to open the door. That's sort of the way most of them work. There also has to be a means to detach the door from the opener. That's the red handle and rope. That's actually required under 325. Components, and I know you can't read a lot of this, so you'll be able to see that in the PowerPoint. But basically, torsion bar, this coil with a wire cable. They're usually connected down here. So these connections at the very bottom left and right of the door are under extreme tension when the door is in a closed position, and anything that would affect those two brackets and or these cables is a really big deal. The door opener itself has the trolley and has a little J-bar. There's an attachment bracket, the wall mount, and then these stabilizing struts at the top. LiftMaster, I told them if they sent me some graphics, I'd give them a little plug. So I used all LiftMaster stuff because they were nice enough to send us all the literature that they've got. They've got ones now that are Wi-Fi connected where you can actually open them off your smartphone or close them off the smartphone. And it'll tell you whether the door's opened or closed and whatnot remotely. So everything's getting wirelessly connected, just like the smoke alarms are with the Nest and some of the other units. Yes, sir?
Yeah, the last inspection I did, they didn't even have a button in their garage to close and open the garage door. They had it all Wi-Fi.
Yep.
I wasn't able to inspect it.
Yep. And I know what you mean. I've seen one or two of those too. So and the comment was that some of the new door openers don't even have wall control switches. So the bad thing about the no wall control switches is it means you're allowed to operate the door and you're not necessarily in line of sight of the door. So you could close a door with a little kid in front of it, which I find scary. I want people to be able to see that door when they hit the button. The other thing I've seen that's kind of scary on some new ones is they have an automatic timer on the door that if the door is open for too long, it will automatically close. Like if someone drove away and forgot to hit the door opener to close in their car, the thing will close. The problem with that is we almost lost a termite guy that way. I'm inspecting the garage door, and all of a sudden the wall control unit starts beeping, making a funny noise. The termite guy was standing under the door, and it starts to close with him right there by the door. He didn't know what was going on. I'd never seen one of these things before. I didn't know what was going on. The door starts moving, and you had to pull the guy out of the way so he didn't get whacked by this automatically closing door. I find those scary. But anyway. The springs, and you'll see whether it's a swing arm type or whether it's a sectional. The sectionals will almost always have the torsion springs around the shaft. The swing arms will have these coiled springs on the sides. They should have safety cables in them. We had a garage door guy come into Silicon Valley a while back, probably, 3-4 months ago. And he said, actually, some of these types of springs are more dangerous than the really old, those big monster springs. He said these are actually more dangerous than those because there's a lot more energy in them. He said when those old ones fail, they tend to not go flying as much as these things here will go through walls, apparently, or people if they're in the way. Safety sensors. again, I mean, we all know what they look like. The hinges, I'm just kind of going through the parts that where we have problems. Yes?
Quick one on the springs back there, not that we would ever do it, but just a heads up to everybody. Don't ever think that one of those roll-up springs that you can take that loose with a screwdriver and a crescent wrench.
Yeah.
Those things spin out so fast to take your fingers off and
Yep. I would never touch a torsion spring on a garage door. I don't care if I had the tools or not. You have to be nuts to be a garage door guy. It's like roofers. They're really dangerous, you know, professions because of those springs have a tremendous amount of energy in them. Yes, sir?
For the solid door, is there supposed to be a safety device inside?
Yeah, that's why I said there's supposed to be a safety. But he said even those things, sometimes they won't, with these springs, if they're under enough tension, they can still cause injury. Yeah, Carl?
Height of the,
We'll get to that. Yeah, we'll get to that. So anyway, the other place I see, it's not, my back button's not working. On the hinges, the other place I see problems a lot with sectional doors is the hinges. They vibrate. Hinge screws back out. Wall control panels. The LiftMaster guys, I actually let them look at this presentation, and they said we call them control panels. They're buttons. Some of them are pretty sophisticated. I mean, this one has temperature. Some of them actually have that auto close feature built into them. I think that's where the electronics for that lives, is in these wall control buttons. We'll get to installation on these too. Rollers, that's another big place where we see problems. They wear, they come out of tracks. There's everything from really cheap ones to really expensive ones, and on some heavy doors, these are even dual rollers. The track pulley and spring bar, so the track, sometimes you'll see double tracks to accommodate doors where there's low overhead. This roller pulley assembly here, there's a cable coming off of that, very high tension, and actually there's supposed to be a warning label we'll get to in a little bit at the bottom left and right corner of the door. The J-bar, this piece right here, often you'll see those installed upside down. It actually has an orientation. The hook is supposed to be at the bottom like that, not at the top. The trolley carriage, that's actually where the safety release is. This should engage properly and be tracked properly. Kind of what it looks like. So you've got this header bracket that attaches to the wall, the J-bar trolley carriage, and then there's a tensioner there that allows you to, if it's a chain drive, to adjust the slack in the chain, and emergency release. Here's that bottom left and right door. There's a couple different ways that those brackets, and this is the one where the cable actually attaches. If it's ones where the screws are removable, they're supposed to be painted, and there's supposed to be a warning label that says basically, don't remove me. Because you can remove any of those brackets on that door except for these. These it'll release all the tension on that cable, and that you'll have that torsion bar trying to wind that thing up, and it'll take somebody's head. That's the actual warning label you should see adjacent to any of these bottom brackets that have removable screws in them. Here's one where this is a non-removable type. This is actually built into the door, so you can't take these off, but yet it's still got, it says do not attempt to remove or adjust or repair this bottom bracket, is kind of what that says. So this is actually a really big safety issue if somebody's been mucking around with those or they're damaged or what. The basics of the installation, and again, you don't have to under the CREIA standards. I want to make sure we're really clear on this. This is the inspection standards for somebody that's a garage door technician, not necessarily for a home inspector. You can choose to do this if you want, but you're not required to do it. So check the emergency door release. That would mean actually releasing the handle, pulling the handle to release the trolley from the door. The release rope has to be a maximum of 72 inches off the standing surface. So when they're up here, that's not okay. They can be down here, that's okay. I know why people shorten them, it's because they've got luggage racks on the top of their cars and they don't want them ripping stuff off. But the standard doesn't recognize that as a valid excuse for that. They want someone to be able to reach that if the safety devices fail and someone's trapped. The purpose of that is to be able to release the door so someone doesn't die. So it's actually a safety device. Check the door for mechanical damage, loose hinges, loose rollers that don't track properly. If the door has a manual latch on it, the tech should be ensuring that door latch, the manual latch, is actually disabled, because if somebody locks the door and tries to open the door with the automatic opener, bad things can happen. The required safety labels, there should be the spring danger warning label at the spring. There's actually a red little tag that's supposed to be attached to the torsion bar. There should be the general warning on the back of the door, and we'll see pictures of some of these. There should be a warning label adjacent to the door control switch that's never there. I mean, you probably see them, maybe 1 out of every 10 or 20 inspections. And then the labels at the bottom corner brackets, or the brackets at the bottom corners, have to be anti-tamper type that are non-removable. So there should be 1, 2, 3, 4 safety labels on most every garage door you're looking at. That's the general label right there that should be on the back side of the garage door. And that just says basically, here's how you release it. Don't let little kids play with it. Don't open and close it while little kids are in the way or things are in the way. That's all the just general CYA device stuff. Take a look at the springs and counterbalance. It's unsafe to operate any door with a broken spring. So, at that point, if you see a torsion spring or something broken, it's automatically you're on to the next one. You don't even hit the button on them. If it's got a fixed movable door, a swing arm door, then it has to have containment cables. A lot of the older ones do not. And again, if those springs release, if they break or something lets loose, those things can go through the side of a car. The torsion springs don't require that because they're inherently contained by the rod. The door opener has to have a reinforcement bracket at the attachment point where the J hook comes down. Some of those are integral, and you're not going to be able to tell if they're there. The J bracket, again, has an orientation. The hook should be at the bottom, not at the top. You'll see those reversed occasionally. It changes the way the door actually functions and the amount of force it takes to open it. It's more efficient when it pulls from the bottom than opposed to having this hook thing at the top. Manual door inspection. So you're supposed to, if you're a tech, you would actually remove or release the opener and then move the door through its full range manually, and then make sure that it will maintain position at the half open and 2/3 open position. And that's to make sure that the door counterbalance is properly adjusted, the springs are properly adjusted. The idea is that if the door weighs 500 pounds, you don't want the door opener to be trying to move 500 pounds. You want the door opener to be just basically assisting this kind of properly balanced heavy door. Wall station located a minimum of 5 feet off the standing surface. That's to the button. It should be direct line of sight to the door, should be properly secured, and there should be a warning label attached to it. The photoelectric infrared beams, if it has them, they have to be placed so that a 6-inch obstruction will trip them. Not 6 inches off the floor, but a 6-inch obstruction. And they came up with that number because that's roughly the diameter of the head of an infant. So, because that's who we're trying to protect, is little kids. 4 inches is suggested but not required, and that's like LiftMaster and some of the manufacturers will say put them at 4 or 5 inches, and that's simply to avoid the problem with somebody measuring like to the bracket holes at 6 inches and saying they're done. There is no minimum height in the UL standard, so they could be right dead flat on the ground I'm not saying that's a good idea, but there's no minimum. There's only a maximum trip. And in some cases, you'll find doors that actually use other means. So you can find doors that don't have safety devices, and that's okay, as long as there is that secondary means of some other type. You can test the secondary system, non-contact system. Again, I do it by rocking the door and travel. The idea is, though, if the beams are obstructed, the door should not move. When you start the close cycle, if you interrupt the beam, and this is the instructions that come out of the DASMA checklist, interrupt the beam. They recommend with a broom or some other object. I don't know about you, but I just use my foot. The door, when it's interrupted, should stop within a very short period of time, less than 2 seconds, and then should return to the full open position. Some really old doors, sometimes the safety beams will only cause them to stop, but that's ones that predate the 325. And then the 325 entrapment system test is for sectional doors only. It's not, most garage door openers are not actually listed or approved for non-sectional doors. So you'll see them installed on swing arm doors, but quite often, if they're new, they'll actually say this door opener is only intended for use on sectional doors. But you don't want to contact test a non-sectional door, so you don't want to be contact testing, or the DASMA guys are recommending that you don't contact test a swing arm type door. And the test that UL says is a 2x4 laid on the 4-inch dimension, flat on the ground, so it's theoretically 2 inches. It's a 1.5 nominal. It's supposed to hit that and return. The CREIA and ASHI SOPs obviously say you don't have to do that. I personally choose to, but I can certainly understand why people don't if they bought doors and whatnot. The entrapment test, the UL standard actually spells out how you will test this door. 2x4 at the center point, flat on the side, stand away, initiate the cycle. Door should pause a maximum of 2 seconds when it hits the 2x4 and return to the full open position. That's the UL 325 test. So, components, just kind of going through, that's actually a broken torsion spring. The roller on this one had popped out, so the door is not tracking properly. Here, just so you can see the J-bar, that's the attachment bracket on an older door. There should be a metal bracket, basically so you're not concentrating the load. It spreads it out over a little bit when you have these brackets. If that J-bar was just directly attached, it would probably start to damage the door from opening and closing. So it's really important that those things have brackets. New doors, the bracket, that attachment reinforcement bracket's actually built into the door. Yeah?
Because you have these pictures showing up here, that metal portion at the top of the sectional door, I've done inspections where that was not present, and the reason I do that, I had a certified garage door opener guy show me how he can reach his hand in there, pull the emergency cord, and gain access to the
Yeah.
garage.
Well, there's a big problem with people, and we're seeing people take the release ropes off to avoid that. There's other ways to basically secure the door without having to disable the safety devices, though. So yeah. I mean, if there's openings at the top, people are putting coat hangers through and pulling, all kinds of stuff. So frankly, I treat that the same way. If people are disabling safety devices, like, taking the safety beams and putting them up on the ceiling and taping them together and all that crazy stuff, I have like zero tolerance for that, because, if a little kid gets hurt on a door where a safety device has been intentionally disabled, I just don't think a jury's going to have a lot of sense of humor over that. So, figure out some other way to deal with your security issue without making the door unsafe. So we're going to try, this is one of the problems I was having, is getting this video to work.
The garage door systems industry recognizes the important safety role played by home inspectors, and we are eager to help you maximize the value of your service to your customers. This program, produced by the Garage Door Manufacturers and Dealers Associations, covers the most important parts of a basic garage door inspection. Following these steps will help you give competent and reliable advice to your clients. Although you will encounter many different brands of doors and automatic openers, this program will cover a common installation of a residential sectional garage door connected to an automatic garage door opener. A few steps also apply to a door without an opener. This program does not apply to tilt-up one-piece doors. First, an important word of caution. The garage door is typically the largest moving object in the house, and many of its components are under high tension. Improper installation or maintenance of a garage door can create a hazardous condition that can cause serious injury or even death. Because of potential dangers involved, all repairs and adjustments must be performed by a trained door systems technician using proper tools and instructions. To find a trained technician in your area, go to www.doors.org and search through the IDA member directory. These inspection steps assume that the door is operable. If the door appears inoperable from the outset, a trained door systems technician should be contacted. This video demonstrates the safest procedures that are supported by the garage door systems industry. If you encounter a problematic situation, we urge you to follow our recommendations. In some cases, you may need to use your best judgment on how to proceed safely. Now, here is a quick 10-point inspection that can be performed in a few minutes. To conduct the inspection, you should have a tape measure, a flashlight, a 2x4 piece of wood at least 6 inches long, and if available, a garage door remote control. Depending on your height, a ladder or step stool may also be handy. You may also want to have a hard copy of this 10-point checklist. This one-page document is included on this DVD, or it can be downloaded from the DASMA website. Look in the Publications section for Technical Data Sheet 167. Our first 7 checkpoints should be conducted while inside the garage with the door fully closed. First, if the door has an opener, check to see if the door has a means of manually detaching the door from the door opener. This feature, sometimes called an emergency release handle, is essential for many situations, such as a power outage or an emergency situation when someone is trapped under a closing door. UL 325, the nationally recognized standard for garage door openers, requires that the handle or gripping surface be colored red and be easily distinguishable from the rest of the opener system. The handle should be easily accessible and no more than 6 feet above the garage floor. If the door system has such a manual release handle, the door passes our first check. Second, check the condition of the door panels. Are they free of any signs of fatigue, cracking, or separation of materials? If the answer is no, the door could present a hazardous condition that should be inspected by a trained door systems technician before proceeding with this inspection. Our third checkpoint makes sure the door system contains 4 important warning labels. There should be a spring warning label attached to the spring assembly and a general warning label attached to the back of a door panel. If the door has an opener, there should be a warning label attached to the wall in the vicinity of the wall control button. And on most doors, a tension warning label should be attached next to each garage door bottom bracket. Some newer doors have tamper-resistant bottom brackets that will not require this warning label. If warning labels are missing, a local door systems dealer should be able to provide the appropriate labels. Next, with the door still in the closed position, visually inspect the springs for damage. If a spring is broken, operating the door can cause serious injury or death. Do not operate the door until the spring is replaced by a trained door systems technician. If the door has extension springs, conduct the same inspection. Since some parts are under high spring tension, loose hardware could present a hazardous condition. Visually check the door's hinges, brackets, and fasteners. Are they securely attached to the door panels? If some hardware is not secure, a trained door systems technician should inspect the door and make appropriate repairs before you proceed with the inspection. Are all the track brackets securely attached to the wall? If the door has an opener, the door must have an opener reinforcement bracket that is securely attached to the door's top section. The door should have horizontal as well as vertical reinforcement. Many door sections, like this one, have a special steel plate hidden beneath the steel skin in the center of the door to provide the vertical reinforcement. Other doors may have reinforcement bars added to the door. The horizontal and vertical reinforcement allows for a secure attachment of the operator arm. If the door does not have an attachment bracket or is not securely attached to the section, damage might occur to the door or the safety systems might not operate properly. A trained door systems technician should correct the problem before you proceed with this checklist. The header bracket of the opener rail should be securely attached to the wall or header using lag bolts or concrete anchors. If nails are used, the rail could pull out during extended use. If there is no apparent spring damage and if all these hardware parts appear to be securely fastened, you can proceed. Checkpoint number 5. Make sure that the door is in the closed position. If the door has an opener, pull the manual release to disconnect the door from the opener. Without straining yourself, manually lift the door by grasping the door in a safe place where your fingers cannot be pinched or injured. If the door has handles, use the handles to lift the door. This particular door has pinch-protected sections and no handles. Consequently, we carefully lift it at a safe point by a hinge and at a safe point between the pinch-protected sections. If the door is hard to lift, then it is clearly out of balance. This can be an unsafe condition and maintenance is required. If you can lift the door, raise it to the fully open position, then close the door. The door should move freely, not open or close more quickly than the force applied, and it should open and close without difficulty. If the door is difficult to open or close, the door should be inspected by a trained door systems technician before proceeding with this inspection. As the door operates, make sure that the rollers stay in the track throughout the opening and closing of the door. If any rollers fall out of the track, the door system should be repaired by a trained door systems technician before you proceed with the inspection. After conducting this check, reconnect the door to the opener if present. This is generally done by activating the opener until it reconnects itself to the door. Checkpoint 6. The counterbalance system is usually comprised of torsion springs mounted above the door header or extension springs which are usually found next to the horizontal track. When springs break, containment helps to prevent broken parts from flying dangerously in the garage. Torsion springs are already mounted on a shaft, which inherently provides containment. If the door has extension springs, verify that spring containment is present. Extension springs should be contained by a secure cable that runs through the center of the springs. If no containment method exists, a trained door systems technician should inspect the door and add an appropriate means of containment. Number 7 is for a door with an opener. Locate the wall station push button and measure the vertical distance between the button and the adjacent standing surface. The button should be at least 5 feet above the standing surface and high enough to be out of the reach of small children. If the button is too low, a trained door systems technician can relocate the button. Now press the push button to see if it successfully operates the door. The garage door must have at least one working wall-mounted push button. All push buttons must be mounted in clear view of the door and safely away from all moving parts. If it does not, a trained door systems technician can solve this problem. Checkpoint number 8 is for doors with openers. Check to see if photoelectric eyes are present. They will typically be found near the floor, mounted to the left and right sides of the bottom door panel. Federal law states that residential garage door openers manufactured after 1992 must be equipped with photoelectric eyes or some other additional safety reverse feature that meets UL 325 standards. If a garage door system does not have photo eyes, a trained door systems technician can determine if that system meets federal requirements. If photoelectric eyes are present, measure the vertical distance between the photo eyes and the floor. If the photo eyes are higher than 6 inches above the floor, they should be relocated to a position that is no higher than 6 inches above the floor. If needed, a trained door systems technician can relocate the eyes. This test applies to door systems that are equipped with openers and photoelectric eyes. Standing inside the garage but safely away from the path of the door, use the remote control or wall button to close the door. As the door is closing, wave an object in the path of the photoelectric eye beam. The door should immediately reverse and return to the fully open position. If it does not, a trained door systems technician can diagnose the problem and provide a solution. And finally, checkpoint number 10. Besides the entrapment protection provided by devices like photoelectric eyes, garage doors with openers must be able to reverse after hitting an obstruction. This check is conducted with the door fully open. UL 325 requires this 2x4 test, but in some rare cases, this test has damaged the door system when the opener's force setting has been improperly set or when the opener reinforcement bracket is not securely or appropriately attached to the top section. If you have any concerns that this test may cause damage, a trained door systems technician should check the entire system and conduct the test. Under the center of the door, place a 2x4 piece of wood flat on the floor, in the path of the door. Standing inside the garage but safely away from the path of the door, use the remote control or wall button to close the door. When the door contacts the wood, the door should automatically reverse direction and return to the fully open position. If the door does not reverse direction after contacting the wood, a person could be severely injured or killed when trapped under this door. If the door fails this test, a trained door systems technician should be contacted to bring this door system into compliance with UL 325. And that's it. These 10 steps should take less than 5 minutes. The International Door Association and the Door and Access Systems Manufacturers Association are proud to have developed this checklist for home inspectors throughout the nation. If you have any questions about this checklist or about a specific door system, we encourage you to contact a local trained door systems technician. To find a garage door dealer in your area, please visit the International Door Association's website at www.doors.org.